Welcome to the first edition of High School Lowdown, formerly known as Prep Overview. I'm Steve Wilson, and with me is Ernest Boker and Jeff Bird. And we'll be talking about Week 1 action. And, of course, Week 1 means Red Carpet Bowl.
This is the not quite the 50th anniversary. That'll be next year, but we're getting close. And got Vicksburg and Brandon in the early game, and Warren Central at Pearl and Nightcap played at Viking Stadium. Should be a couple of good ball games.
Well, just looking at the stat sheet for Vicksburg and Brandon, Brandon's got a pretty big defensive end, Nelson Adams, who committed to Mississippi State, 6'5", 250. He's definitely going to be a test for Vicksburg's offensive line.
Vicksburg's strength is going to be their offense, so that's that'll be a good matchup for them. See how they do. And Vicksburg, a lot of potential this year. If they can straighten out their defense from last year, they can maybe do some good things. And Brandon always seems to be one of those teams you just never know what you're going to get. They're kind of the same as Vicksburg, a lot of potential, but they never quite seem to pan out maybe the way they should. And it'd be interesting to see how those two teams come out of the gate.
Well, Jeff, you'll be covering Warren Central and Pearl. Pearl, a very talented team. Talk about what you know about them so far.
Pearl was 8-4 last year. They get a quarterback come in from Madison Ridgeland Academy, but the big player they have a 6'4" wide receiver named DJ Thompson, who last year caught 45 passes for 809 yards. It's going to be a big matchup problem for a young, pretty inexperienced secondary, at least on the corners. WC's main defense is their safeties coming back. Giving Breckenridge his back, Bill McBride's back. That's the anchor of their defense. The corners was a spot that we're still working on coming into this week.
And from what I've seen at their practice, they don't have a lot of height at the cornerback position. I know they can shift over Corey Davis, who played basketball, but I know they want to save him for offense. But that's going to be quite a tough matchup for them.
Yeah. The big thing is this will be a new offense that Rob Morgan has put in. See how they do. Watch the tight end Patrick Vardno. I think he's going to be a big impact player for them on offense. Plus, they have the 6'5" Corey Davis who's going to be on the flanker. And so those two kids are going to be a big target for Chase Led. He's going to make his first start.
And they really need to find some playmakers. They averaged, I think, 10 points a game last year. Kind of the same Warren Central offense we've seen for a few years, where they play great defense, keeps them in the game, but they just can't seem to score a ton of points to take advantage of that. And they need to find that this year, especially with Malcolm Grant gone, caught 40 passes last year. Didn't really have a star running back last year, so they need to find somebody who can break a game open, make a big play here and there, and really give them a spark, I think.
Josh was high on two particular sophomore kids. One was a guy named Greg King, who's going to be starting at tailback, and they have another Stamps coming through named Aaron Stamps, who's a little sophomore who he's really thinks can do a lot of good things for him. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, in the other games, not to leave them out, but PCA will be hosting Union Christian in their debut, and obviously PCA is going to be mostly without Jonah Masterson. It's kind of going to be a preseason game for them in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, they're going to show pretty much a plain vanilla offense. Union Christian was not very good last year. They won one game, and that was their first game, and after that they were blown out most of the time. Jonah Masterson, their quarterback, PCA's quarterback, had over 2,000 yards passing last year, but had an appendicitis inflammation in the preseason. So his action's going to be very limited. They'll run Peter Harris at quarterback. He's going to be their slot receiver most of the year, backup running back. But he'll run a lot more option and draws and leads and that kind of thing than they will, most of the year whenever Jonah's back there slinging it.
Well, it'll also mark the debut of former Vicksburg running back Kawayne Gaston, a guy that we've gotten to know over the years. What do you think Kawayne's going to do in the PCA uniform?
Like I said, should have easily 1,500 yards, easily. And I think when I look at Porter's Chapel, my main concern is their depth of their line. They cannot get anybody hurt. They look like they only have like 5 or 6 linemen, and that's hard to go through a season, even with just 5 or 6 linemen. Because if somebody goes down, then they'll have to move Wayne may have to play guard because he's probably the next biggest kid on their team at 210 pounds.
And that's been a problem they've dealt with for years. You know, they'll find somebody to plug in there. It may not be a 250, 260 pound monster, maybe a 150 pound guy with a lot of tenacity, but you know, that's something you deal with on that level a lot.
I know when I was in Georgia and I was covering a lot of wing T teams, they would have that pulling guard be a quick, like 170-pound guy. So you would see a 170-pound guy lining up next to a 260, a 270, a 300-pound left tackle, and you see this little guy pulling out. And
speaking of small linemen, St. Aloysius, which is our next game, we'll get that in a second. They have a 150-pound guard named Max Loving, sophomore. So you know, that'll be something to watch, see how he stacks up in there with against some of the teams that they're going to play later in the season.
And it's so strange because they have a lot of behemoths on there. Robert Arledge is a big kid. Sage Lewis is a big kid. And to have that one guy on there that's rather, not to say that he's short in stature but big in heart.
Yeah, that's what Coach B.J. Smith really loved about him. So he's just kind of like a bulldog down in there, can just really get in there and go and just scrap and claw. And, you know, you see those guys every now and then, especially in the Class 1A levels and the private school levels where you don't have the numbers. You know, you're not drawing 10 300-pound kids out every year.
The thing I like about St. Al's, the fact is they have 10 linemen. They have 5 more linemen behind the 5 they got. And like I said, Lewis and Arlish were probably going to be the two probably the best linemen in our county this year. You know.
I agree. Well, that brings us to St. Al, and they're going to be taking on a very important Catholic rival, Madison St. Joe. That's always, I know that's a big thing with the Catholic schools playing amongst each other, and I know that's going to be I'd say that'd be a bellwether game for them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, so it'll be a good test for them. Madison was St. Joe's a playoff team last year, winning record. It's a big rivalry game. It's a game St. Al lost last year, so it'll be a good test to see how far they progressed. St. Al has a really young team, and you know, a lot of them played as freshmen and sophomores last year, sophomores and juniors this year. So it should be a good measuring stick for them to see how far they've come in the past year.
I did the game last year. St. Al was in the game into the fourth quarter. Carlton Campbell had a long run in that game, put them back in the game, but then they had 2 interceptions in the last 2 minutes, and 2 of them were run back for both of them were run back for touchdowns, and it made a close game into about 3 touchdown loss for them. So, Madison St. Joe has a pretty good quarterback back, and they also have a receiver who was good, if I remember. So it's going to be a tough game for them.
Well, kind of shifting gears out into the area, obviously several of our area schools will be opening up their season as well. Hines AHS, they've kind of put together a nice little rivalry against Raymond, which both of them share. They're, what, about 15 miles apart?
15 or 20.
Utica and Raymond.
It's another one of those tests for Hines AHS. They were terrible last year, no other way to put it. And Raymond was their one win. They went 1-9, and they beat Raymond. So Raymond is a 4A school. Hines is a 1A school, but it's you know, maybe a little more even than that. Raymond's struggling a little bit, you know, the last few years. So it's a good you know, that'll be maybe a good chance to get off on the right foot for Hines if they play well.
Oh, also, Port Gibson will be open up with the Hollandale Blue Devils. It'll be blue on blue.
Port Gibson is probably one of our most explosive teams that we have in our area. They have 9 starters back on offense and 7 on defense. Quarterback had 16 Sorrento sales, at 1,600 yards passing, 600 rushing. But the kid, probably the most talented kid maybe in our area, Darius Barnes, ran a 4.21 to Mississippi State football camp. Has already committed to them. Will be key on both sides. He's going to be a safety and a wide out on one side. Lynn Lane, their coach, is excited about their team because of not only do they have Darius Barnes, but they also have Calvin Smith, who's really good. They have Tommy McAlpin, a running back slot. So they have a lot of weapons this year.
Well, Tallulah will be opening up with a new coach this year. A coach that's well known to many of our Vicksburg Post readers, Vicksburg native Chris Busby.
Yes, he's a former longtime coach at Porter's Chapel, spent a year or 2 over at St. Aloysius coaching baseball and football. Really good guy. And they get a kind of a nice little trying to think of a nice way to put this, but an introductory game to the season, kind of similar to Porter's Chapel, where they're playing a struggling team. To open up with Park Place Christian, this will be their first game as an 11-man football team after a year of 8-man. So talked to Chris this morning. He said there's not a lot of film on them, not a lot you can go on because, they're going to be running different things, different schemes, different offensive plays, obviously. So they're kind of going in blind. So it's a little bit of a challenge on that level, trying to figure out what's going to work and what's not. What you can do against a team like that.
Well, one thing that I like that he's going back to is I know he's going back to more of a ground-oriented game because he's not really a spread guy, and I think that's good because talking with a lot of the Tallulah people last year, the spread just didn't fit. They always felt like their team needed to be a power-running team, and I think this fits more of their character.
Well, that's when you get ingrained with that for years and years like they were, and they've had a lot of success with it over the years, that's maybe a habit that you need to break out of once in a while. They got a talented quarterback, Hunter Wyndham, who threw for 1,700 yards last year. So maybe you want to let that guy throw it a little bit. But obviously you got to have some balance there. So then maybe they need to pound it a little more here and there, and they'll figure that out as they go, I'm sure.
And of course, Central Hines will be opening their season on Friday.
They'll open up against Riverfield, I believe, if I'm remembering right. Just kind of another good introductory game. Central Hines they lost almost a dozen seniors, I believe.
Hunter Ferry
a lot of talented players from last year when they went 10-2. So they need to kind of figure out where they're going. They got some back. Jordan Curry, their quarterback, probably one of the better quarterbacks in NAIS.
And they have one of the best place kickers possibly in the state.
Yeah, a guy named Tate Demuth, not being recruited a lot yet for some reason, but he's bombed a couple of 50-yarders in his career, went 50 for 51 on extra points last year. So very talented player there.
Well, that brings us to the end of our first edition of High School Lowdown. For all the updated scores and whatnot, you can go to VicksburgPost.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at Vix, V-I-X, Post Sports. And for Ernest Boker, Jeff Bird, I'm Steve Wilson. Thank you, and good night, and good luck.